This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, nonstop Leafs talk starts now.
Oh, yes, the classic Monday scaries. It's the Monday edition of Leafs Morning Take presented by PointsBet Canada and Montana's. It's Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill. Rosie, first and foremost, how was your weekend, good sir?
Not too bad, not too bad. No complaints. Had the kiddos by myself, and the wife was doing a little friend visiting, so no complaints other than that pesky loss on Saturday night. It always sucks when they lose that Saturday night game. You got to wait too damn long to put it behind you.
It always sucks when they lose to Boston, period. And T-minus 11 days before Rosie hits Toronto. Is this like your first time in the T-Dot in like 10 years?
No, last year I did a trip with my son when he got kind of obsessed with the Leafs, so it was wicked. It was just me and him. We flew down, got a hotel right by Maple Leaf Gardens there, checked that out, and we were just riding the subway all over town, Hall of Fame, CN Tower, all the stuff, and went down, watched the game, and then went and met the boys after and everything, and he was like, he had his hockey cards in his back pocket, man. It was just, he was absolutely floored, but Matthew snuck out of the building before he could grab him, so little bit of a devastation for him, but other than that, it was probably one of the coolest trips I've ever taken because he's 9 and he can cruise around and kind of run around with me. It was wicked.
How often do you tell stories about playing in the show? Like, is this something you talk about daily, monthly, holiday period, or is this like, I would bring it up every day, every minute, quite frankly.
Not just if it comes up or if there's something that I remember, but I don't know. It's just like anything else. You do something a long time ago and whatever, it's just something you did. And if it comes up, it comes up.
Such a humble Canadian boy and modest at that. Remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, drop us a chat down below. We'll get to that later on. Should mention as well, we did have Claude Giroux on the show on Friday, so go check that out on YouTube. It's everywhere. And yeah, give that a listen, give that a play, give it a like as well as we get over the boards here. All right, so we're going to hop right into it. Back at the TD Garden on Saturday night, Leafs and Bruins, second time of 4 this season, and a late win for the Boston Bruins. That was sort of demoralizing. I thought Toronto played a pretty decent game. Matt Grzelcyk scores with 1:16 left, but to me, the story, Rosie, without question, was the lethal turnovers. Rielly on the first goal, Timmins on goal 2, and Tavares on the winner. And quite frankly, you just can't do that against teams like the Boston Bruins, right?
No, especially against them. And you know what's impressed me about this team is they've really limited that this year. They have not, they've not done. I think last year they were considerably worse at it, and years past has been their Achilles heel. And they seem to get a little fancy. And yeah, they got lots of offense, but they're kind of doing those low percentage plays that end up. In that league, when you make a turnover, that's the biggest thing I noticed from the American League to the NHL is the transition. When the puck gets turned over, it goes the other way so goddamn fast. And when you're turning it over like that, it usually ends up in the back of your net. So against a team like the Boston Bruins, the way they're rolling right now, you just got to be playing tight and you can't be making those kind of mistakes. And ultimately they just made too many of them. But I mean, by far they were in that game. It was a good hockey game, an exciting hockey game in a tough barn to win for the visitors. So definitely that was the difference maker for sure. And they admitted to that after the game and understood what happened. So tough one.
I was jacked to watch that game to begin with. Saturday night, the Boston Bruins, mid-January, potential opponent in the Stanley Cup playoffs, 2 of the top teams in the league. And then Wayne Simmons and Nick Foligno dropped the mitts, and I wanted to go through my TV and go through a wall for these guys. I thought that was a perfect start to that game, Rosie.
Yeah, that was wicked. It was weird because I had a buddy over too, and was all pumped up for the game, was ready to rock, and all of a sudden, like, it seemed foreign to me, man, to have the play go on, and that like you hear the crowd do something, and the whistle goes, but nothing happened. Yeah. You're like, what the hell? And then it pans over, and you're like, yeah. And I was like, this is like that is it's like it's our first square off of the year and like our third fight of the entire year. So I was pumped too, and 2 old warriors and the veteran dudes too. And I have a feeling if Simmer wasn't at the end of his shift there, that would have gone a different way. But nonetheless, a good spirited deal. And I love starting off a game like that, especially in Boston or in a barn where you got 2 rivals going at it.
It's great to get the unique perspective of somebody who's been at the other end of like the neck turn, right? Where you look and it's like, oh, he's dancing. But I totally agree with you. I think full credit to Nick Foligno for giving Simmons that fight. I think he comprehends and knows Simmons's role. He was buzzing around. They had Dryden Hunt in the lineup as well. A couple guys under the weather, as we know, the last couple of days. So that's why. But Foligno's been an important player to Boston this year. I thought he was an important player for the Leafs. Unfortunately, he just wasn't close to 100% as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think it served its purpose, and I have no problem with it. And I think the cherry on top was that little respect tap after the fight, man. Like I just I always think it's so intriguing, and I understand it's a job sometimes, and I'm sure you're just as guilty as anybody else. Like, how do you scrap a friend? Like, I'm sure these guys said more than 3 words to each other. They played in the same team a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, it's just it's hard to compare to anything else, man. It's not normal and it is an anomaly, I think. But when you're out there and you're playing a game, and the only thing that matters is your team and your game. And if you want to do that, I mean, it's hard to argue that that fight didn't set the tone for the whole game. The whole game had lots of intensity, lots of grit. You know, Bunting's in there. I mean, we missed the entirety. I think it was after the second, or maybe it was the first,
What was
one of
that,
the
by the way?
intermissions. All kinds of stuff going on. We completely missed it. We're listening to friggin' the panel yap about whatever the whole time, and they're like, and this is going on as we speak. It's like, well, of course they're not showing it, but lots of intensity. And I think that that fight set the fireworks for the tone of the game, which I just love. And it was a great game to watch, high intensity the whole way. But those two guys, you know, I really respect a guy like Foligno, who's, you know,
Yeah.
he's just, that's not his role, but he'll do it. I love those guys who, you know, I knew what my role was, and I stepped up and did it, and that was kind of my thing. But guys that don't necessarily have to, every guy in the league could add that to their repertoire, and not very many guys do. And a guy like, you know, Foligno and obviously Simmons, he's even more so. He's a guy that's, you know, played as many games as he had, and been as big of an impact player on the ice as he had, and he still is feared and willing to fight anybody pretty much, and goes against some big boys. And I just have nothing but respect for those guys. And, you know, when you're in the heat of the moment, you give the guy a tap and saying, like, whether we're buddies or we've played together or not, it's like, hey, I know that you're probably willing. Do you think this is time for you? Because it's time for me. I'm asking, let's go. And you shed it, and you get that, oh boy, here we go. And then all the energy dumps, and, you know, you unload adrenaline, and then all of a sudden it's over, and you're like, who? And then you look at the guy, and it's like, hey, respect to you, man. Like, I love you, or whatever the deal is, whatever your relationship is. When you know that guy, it's, once it's over, you're like, okay, good. Like, disaster didn't happen, and you give the guy a tap. And that's just kind of how it is on both ends usually.
Who was your closest friend that you dropped the gloves with ever?
Good question, man. Honestly, like high school buddies and stuff, you're getting ready for the season and playing 3-on-3 or doing whatever you can, and you end up breaking sticks over each other and MFing each other and stuff like that. But in the big leagues and in pro, I can't really think of too much, man. You end up knowing guys just through people, or hanging out at a bar, or a charity tournament, or a golf thing in
Yeah.
the summer, and you know each other, and you end up, and you've already scrapped is usually the thing. And it's always the time where you go up and say, hey, how's it going? And end up having a couple beers together. And it just always seems to go that way, with just a mutual respect of guys that are, you know, professionals in the game. They all seem to just get it.
I get it too. So the Boston Bruins now 11 points up on the Leafs. They have 2 games in hand. They had to get that game. I think they're going to be hard pressed to catch Boston. The Bruins just never lose. Meantime, Matt Murray, what was your assessment of him on Saturday night? He makes 30 stops. I thought he was awesome early on. I thought he made some big time saves, but I hate to be this guy because my brother's a goalie. You know, you understand the sympathy of being a goalie and how hard it is to be a goalie. But there was a couple soft goals, like, and I understand it was a goal scorer's goal, whatever you want to call it, with Pasternak, the look off, and then he goes 5-hole. But I would have to think Murray wanted at least a couple of those back, no? Because then you look at the other side, Rosie, and Allmark made some unbelievable stops to keep that a close game there in the third period.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right off the bat, it was Murray in my mind who was shutting the door. He looked so poised. Like when he's on his game, and it's like the announcers, big chance goes on, and Murray's just like, stop, like, see you later, get that out of here. Like, he's so calm and poised and big and
Yeah.
in position and no scramble. And I really like him when he's on his game. And he seemed to be dominating. I mean, that first shift on Marchand was a backdoor bury. And I mean, he
Huge.
stretches over to get his glove on that. That was disgusting to set the tone. And, I imagine the bench at that point is going, what are we doing giving up a chance like that in the first couple of minutes? That's just what you absolutely try to avoid. And you're lucky to have a guy like him bailing you out in those situations. But yeah, the Pasternak, I felt like, man, you got to take that shot and respect the fact that, you got the shot, and hopefully they can take away that backdoor play as a defenseman that was sprawled out there. So caught him 5-hole there. I felt like he was kind of caught a little bit flat-footed and got the 5-hole. And then on that other one, it was 5-hole too. I felt like he couldn't really see the release, and by the time he got his 5-hole covered, it was too late. So I don't want to blame him at all, but at the end of the day, he let in a couple extra that he could have maybe stopped or in a perfect world, and Ullmark didn't. So I thought, what do you give him, a B plus or an A, and Ullmark probably an A plus. So it's just the way it went. But at the end of the day, I don't blame him for the loss at all. I think the turnovers were too much, and you can't be doing that against a team that's hotter. They'll make you pay.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, it's important to bring up that Linus Ullmark is on pace to win the Vezina Trophy. He's been doing this to every team, but I'm victim of it. I think a lot of Leafs fans are victim of it. Why does Boston always score that big goal? And I understand I'm not putting much stock in a game in mid-January, but they always seem to score that big goal, and it always seems to happen against the Leafs. Like Grzelcyk 116, I know it was a terrible turnover. We're going to get to that conversation in mere moments, but like, they always seem to have the knack for the dramatics, and they knack to score that big time goal. I just don't know why that always seems to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we're hypersensitive to it. The history with the Boston Bruins and whatnot, we've come out on the short end of it for sure, and that's why it's kind of amplified in our minds of that team. But I mean, if you look at all the times where the Leafs have come up with the big goal, we just go, yep, that's expected. That's what we want this team to do. And we just move on. But like, I mean, Mitch Marner just scored that last couple minute huge goal a game before there, when he buries that from the left side on the power play with that wicked dish from Nylander. No one's saying we just forget about that and focus on kind of the negatives, because we want to be perfect and we want this to be a big year and we want to go deep. So I understand why it happens against Boston. I don't know, but right now that Boston team is the best team in the world. By far, everything is clicking. I mean, they're coached, their D, their forwards, their goaltending, they've got it all going on. And early on, we're thinking, is this a flash in the pan? When is this their true self? And I mean, we're mid-January here, and they haven't lost 2 in a row. They are on pace for historic numbers. Their goaltenders, Vezina winning caliber. It's just, they are nuts right now. And if you want to take a positive out of it, I mean, the Leafs were right there with a chance to win the game, the entire game up until the 58th minute. So I think that if they do meet each other in the playoffs or whatever, it could be a very, very entertaining, high octane series. And if it happens, I'd be looking forward to it in a big way.
Oh, me too. And nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted this from Boston, especially considering all the injuries to start the year. McAvoy, Marchand, among others, and they have not skipped a beat. Jake DeBrusk is out right now. Just an incredible, incredible year, and there's a reason why they have 2 odds-on favorites to win major awards. Jim Montgomery for Coach of the Year, Linus Ullmark for the Vezina Trophy. Montana's is bringing back the viewing party with daily deals in 2023. Monday, half-price wings. I'm all over this, Rosie.
Oh, why wouldn't you, man? Every time they show that, I'm rattled that it's like 9:30 in the morning for me and I can't go smash a bunch of that at the time. But it always looks tasty, man. And yeah, those drink deals paired with some of that going on is a good place to be.
Okay, let's get to Morgan Rielly. So 9 games since coming back from that knee injury. 3 assists, -5, 19 shots on goal. I did some extra digging. I couldn't believe I forgot he hasn't scored a goal in 29 games this year. Coming off an incredible year, gets the big fat extension, newly engaged. He just doesn't look like the same Morgan Rielly. There's got to be something going on with the knee. Obviously, it's going to take some time. But what's your level of concern with Rielly right now?
It would be lower if it wasn't kind of a whole season long thing, and it's kind of almost going in the wrong direction so far. You'd hope when he came back from that, he'd be an impact player, but he just doesn't have any flash. He doesn't seem to have the body language or the facial expressions of like pure confidence of a guy that's like that top 10 pick who's like your franchise defenseman. He just doesn't ever seem to take control like that. Yeah, he can settle the power play down and be solid at certain points in time, but it's just not enough for what expectations are for him. You want him to be that that franchise player, and he's just not. And you take that and mix it in with the fact that we've lost Jake Muzzin, there's a hole in the decor.
Yeah.
It's not a gaping hole. They've shown that they can get it done. But if you're going to go 7 games against that Boston team right there, I think that if I was, I don't really touch too much on the free agent, or on the trade deadline and whatnot. And I like to move the pieces we have right now. And if you can add something great, talk about it then. But I'm starting to think like you might need to go shopping right now and try to get someone in there. And if that's a Luke Schenn or something like that for a couple picks or something like that, I think that could very much work. Depending on your salary cap issues. And Schenner is one of those guys who's not making a lot of money out right now, and he's outplaying his salary by a long shot. So if you could add something like that where you can just close that hole a little bit, because it's not a gaping hole, but it's trending in that direction. And the last thing you want to do is go into playoffs and say, geez, I wish we had more, because at the beginning of the year we looked solid. Morgan Rielly is what he is, and is a very solid guy. And we're in mid-February. He hasn't scored a goal as an offensive defenseman. And Jake Muzzin is probably gone for the whole year. That's a big hit to that decor. And I think that, if we're looking and trying to put something together, that's where I would look.
I was going to text you on Saturday. It sounds like Tampa, Schenner's old team, back interested in him. Contract year. He's having a pretty decent year for a disappointing Vancouver team. So I think if the Leafs want a guy like Luke Schenn back, they're going to have to compete with the likes of Tampa, who seem to get whoever they want at the trade deadline. Brandon Hagel, a big piece last year. I know they don't win it, but still, it seems like every year they make up some key pickups. I thought it was a horrifying night for the Rielly-Timmins pairing. I think it's safe to say that we're not going to see them a lot down the stretch here. You would have to think. Granted, it's one game, and maybe you give them some time. But, yeah, you're so right on Rielly. Like, he's missing that oomph, that jump that we've seen before in his career. I thought last year arguably was his best year of his career offensively, defensively, and from the get-go this year just hasn't been the same player. And now you compound that with the fact of a knee injury. It was a harmless collision, I believe, with Cal Palmieri in November, and just has not been the same player from a point production standpoint. And when you're, noted, as you mentioned, to be an offensive defenseman and you're not producing, it just doesn't look good. And then on top of that, defensively, it's been a disaster too. So to me, I think it just reinforces the ideology that maybe they're better served to go out and pick up a top 4 defenseman than they are a middle 6 winger. And that debate's going to rage on for a while, but I think you're right. Like, they really, really missed, in my opinion, on Saturday, a guy like Jake Muzzin, sadly.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we're seeing splashes of that secondary scoring get plugged in, and some of that stuff's starting to round off and looking good. I like the addition of Hunt, and Engvall's chipping in here and there. That was a bit of a soft goal actually on Ullmark there, since we were talking about it. Engvall's goal, that was
snipe,
kind of like
dude.
almost
that was a
bit of
snipe.
it was. They said it's an 88-mile-an-hour snapshot or something. I was like, no, it wasn't. But nonetheless, you're starting to see that fill out a little bit, and the hole is starting to show on that back end. But I mean, Connor Timmins has been great, and then he has one game, and all across Twitter, it's like, I've seen enough of this Timmins guy. It's like, what do you mean you've seen enough? We've been doing nothing but praise the guy for weeks and weeks, and then he has a tough one against the best team in the world, and all of a sudden we've seen enough. But we'll probably change up that pairing. And it's just tough when you give a guy so much money and you make him your franchise defenseman, and then he doesn't step up to it. You're kind of handcuffed, and usually, hopefully, he's doing one or the other. Maybe he's shutting things down defensively and he just can't get on the score sheet. It's like, okay, well, as long as you're keeping the puck out of the net, or else you're absolutely on fire offensively and you're putting up points and you're contributing to like game-winning goals and stuff like that, then it's huge. And maybe you got a little bit of unreliability on the back end that you need to clean up. It's fine, but he's got neither going on right now. And it's kind of like, is our number one guy almost a liability sometimes, but you got to keep going to him. I mean, you got to keep going to him, but if he's shooting you in the foot more often than not, all you can do is hope that he gets better and maybe, compliment him with something better on his pairing. But it's tough right now. And again, these are the dog days of the season, and by no means are we writing him off or anything like that. I just, I hope he finds a spark here to get going, because he's not up to expectations by any stretch.
I did the math, 46 days away from the March 3rd trade deadline. It's going to be very, very fascinating in this market in terms of team needs. Make sure to subscribe to the Nation Network YouTube page, also the Leafs Nation Twitter at TLNDC, or the Instagram or Facebook accounts. Lots of great prizes and giveaways are coming your way later this month, and your courtesy our new friends over at Montana's. I think the biggest positive, Rosie, out of the weekend was seeing number 34 Austin Matthews back. And I think on top of that, man, he had some major league jump. Like, that's as fresh and as good as I've seen Austin Matthews play, maybe in like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, and a good thing, at the end of the day, it looks like it was a good thing he took that rest. And, he's capable of doing, I was talking to my buddy who was over and it's kind of like, what's up with Matthews? And it's like, he's been good. He's been solid. He's got his numbers are great and everything. He just hasn't been that dynamic, like, I'm dominating, like I'm taking over. I'm getting 3-4 points tonight. Like almost single-handedly winning the game. He just hasn't done that like he did last year. And, that being said, there's no worry or anything. He's still being solid, and you just know that at any point in time he could step out and do something huge and get on that hot streak, like say Marner was earlier. And then as I was saying that, he tucks that short side shelf thing, and it's only players like him that can score those goals where he's the only one in the building who knows he just scored, and it takes everyone else a couple seconds to realize what just happened. I mean, his hands up in the air behind that net, and no one even knew what happened, and he's just that filthy where he can bury those things. And it's nice to see him take a highlight reel goal on something like that against a big team at a big time. I think it was to tie the game. But the thing I like about him the most is that he's not frustrated. He's not trying too hard. He's not trying to do things outside of, the realm of what's realistic to try to get some fireworks going, because that's when problems happen. That's when frustration sets in. That's when mistakes happen and turnovers and whatnot. I think he's showing kind of some veteran presence to keep doing what he's doing. He knows that he's good enough. If he keeps doing what he's doing, things are going to catch fire. And, maybe this year is the year where he just waits till playoffs and then see you later. And how nice would that be?
It would be fantastic. I almost want to say there's an unrealistic expectation for a guy of the ilk of Austin Matthews. And obviously it's unfair to hold anybody in the same breath as what Connor McDavid is doing this season. But you see Matthews score 60 and 73. It trains the mind to automatically assume he's going to do that every year. And Rosie, how hard is it to do that? I mean, there's a reason why we don't see 60 goal scorers every day. Granted, there's a couple guys this season en route for that. But I just think from the get-go, it was an unrealistic expectation to expect that every season, and this year specifically, coming off a Hart Trophy, there's videotape, like teams react and respond and evolve the way they game plan. And pretty much what I've noticed this year is credit to Matthews. Like, teams have said, you know what? We're going to handle Matthews on the power play. We're going to make sure he doesn't kill us. Anybody else kill us. And that's why I think you're seeing the evolution of Mitch Marner a bit, because he's getting a bit more time and space, especially when he's out there with Matthews.
Yeah, and I mean, I bought into it too. You get so excited about that year, and you're like, has this guy just found a new gear that he's going to live in permanently? And it's very, very difficult to do when you have a season like he did last year. Not that I'm familiar with it in any stretch, but you can imagine you just get into this zone of just putting up nonstop goals and points, and you're just in this, you got the blinders on basically, and you just have this crazy season. And then, you get a reset, some disappointment in the playoffs, a big long summer, and you come back at it, and it's like, you just expect him to pick off where he take off. I mean, that was special. That season is special. And to expect him just to do it again isn't really fair. And if you look at the stats on guys that have had seasons like that, they usually don't just follow it up with another one. It's very difficult to do. So I do not think that he's under expectations right now, but we are sitting here with bated breath, waiting to see if he can kind of kick it into that next gear again here sometime soon. And maybe it won't be, maybe it will be in the playoffs, or maybe not at all, but nonetheless, with his caliber, anything's possible.
Scores his 21st on Saturday, 3 shots on goal, 20:08. Again, I thought he had some jump to him. I start to wonder if maybe it's time to give him a bit more look and time with Mitch Marner again, right? I know the Marner-Tavares line has been really good with Yarncroke, but I think you almost deserve it to Austin Matthews to get his boy back in his line and get him cooking a bit. And they've tried everything. It's been an exploration period for Sheldon Keefe. So at the very least, I would like to see that over the next couple games, is maybe some more Marner and Matthews time 5-on-5. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be good. And I mean, there's so much chem, it seems like Nylander and Tavares have had it before, especially early, big time chemistry. I don't think you're taking anything away from anybody by mixing it up. And that's kind of the luxury that Sheldon Keefe has is he can mix those guys up. There's so many weapons. It's like, how do I pair this today? And however you do it is probably not going to be wrong. But yeah, if that's been the formula that's worked in the past with Marner and Matthews, and they messed around with it earlier on and found some other things that were working, won a ton of games with it, got a lot of guys, firing in the Nylander and Marner and Tavares have all had really, really great points in time where the chemistry is going like crazy. And to throw it back to that group, like you say, I don't think would be anything detrimental to the team by any stretch. And maybe you find something like last year again.
The wrap up is brought to you by our friends at PointsBet Canada. All right, Rosie. So a fresh new week. I'm sure you took it on Friday. I told you to be all over the Edmonton Oilers, and they delivered a 7-1 win against the San Jose Sharks. So we're going to ride the momentum into this week. It is Martin Luther King Day in the States, of course, so a busy slate, including a lot of matinee games. I have my eyes on one specifically, and that's the Detroit-Colorado game. Remember that rivalry from like 20 years ago? Impeccable stuff in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it's a 3 Eastern start time. Give me the Colorado puck line in that game. When I can find value the way I did in this one, plus 135, I want to be proven wrong. The Avalanche are angry, coming off, an important game for them. I think they're going to flex their muscles again here. They won, I believe, 7-0 the other day against the Ottawa Senators. I think it's now or never for Colorado. First and foremost, I think this is a guaranteed win, and I very seldom say that on this show. But if you're going to take Colorado, there's minimal value in the money line, so I'm going to go to the puck line against Detroit today.
Yeah, I think that's the best bet on that board by far. And I've been waiting for the Colorado Avalanche to, kick it into gear and find their identity and really start steamrolling some teams and getting themselves in a better playoff picture, because I think they're a better team than they're showing. And, them against the Detroit Red Wings that are pretty mediocre, I think that's a good bet. And for whatever reason, you're definitely getting good value at it at plus 130. So solid bet, I would say, if I had to pick one off of there for sure.
The market, I think, it's not going to react until Colorado starts winning some games. I know they're banged up still, but you still have McKinnon, you still have Ranton, you still have Makar. They're going to go on a tear here, and I think we're going to ride their coattails for the next little while. So it starts this afternoon against Detroit. As we wrap, Rosie, a 3-game week here for the Leafs starts tomorrow at home against the Florida Panthers, Thursday at home to the Winnipeg Jets. And yeah, they do play the Montreal Canadiens. It's been a long, long time since the opening game of the season. So I get pissed off about games against Arizona. I get even more pissed off when they lose to Montreal, because it happens every fucking time. There's the first swear word of the show, and I think it was well-deserved. And I'll probably be on the Habs on Saturday against the Leafs.
Yeah, shit. They're pretty famous for dropping the first game of the year against them for sure.
Yeah.
But, looking at their resume there, I hope they can run across Florida pretty well. And then they got a really tough game there against the Jets. I mean, if you look, they're number 1 in the Western Conference right now, which I don't think anyone was talking about them too hard or buzzing on them. And they've just quietly been a force in the Western Conference. So that'll be an interesting game. And then obviously everyone's looking forward to that Saturday night game against the Canadiens. And I just don't, it's another one of those things. And the Leafs are famous for having things in their head. Their games against Boston, their games against Montreal, and their games in the playoffs, and just not being able to get across that finish line. But I mean, I think this team should be smashing the Montreal Canadiens. They're very young, very inexperienced, and it should be not a cakewalk, but I mean, if they come prepared, they should run over that team. So hopefully that happens. But like you said, huge week coming up and lots to talk about. My eyes are on that Winnipeg Jets game, though. I want to see what they got against the Jets, and they had a really solid game to start that road trip in October against the Jets. They looked like they were finally put it together, and then they followed that up by crapping their pants on the West Coast, California there. So big week for the Leafs, and we'll have a bunch of shows coming your way to talk about how it's going down.
I think that's the first time you've referenced the month of October in 2 months, because you always A, don't talk about it, or B, just move on from it. So I like that you brought us back to that ugly month of October. Way past it, though, and the Leafs feeling pretty good about life right now, although it coming off a disappointing regulation loss here to the Boston Bruins. So we'll pick things up tomorrow. The Leafs and Panthers will have a preview. Rosie, thanks so much for this, bud.
Right on. We'll talk to you soon.
There you have it. That's Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. Thanks so much for listening and watching Talk Tuesday.